Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Back again to bring you the updates for Season 2 Mythic Plus, with 3 new affixes getting added into the game, a couple changes to some existing affixes, and the removal of 3 historic affixes. So we're finally starting to get some affix changes starting up for the season. Now, we haven't been able to test it because Thursday is going to be the first day, I believe, of affix testing and M+ testing. So after we get a chance to do that, I'll have another video of how they're actually playing out. But right now, we have the data mining, as well as this article by Wowhead, talking about how these things are actually supposed to work, because a few of the affixes are a little different than their descriptions would give you. As always, if you want to support the channel, make sure to hit that sub button, check for notifications on as well, as it does help a ton. First and foremost, we have the new affix Afflicted. This is where an afflicted soul will spawn with a disease, curse, and poison debuff, and starts a 10-second cast. Now, the important thing to note is that this is disease, curse, and poison all at the same time. If you did the Mage Tower challenge, we actually had a number of NPCs that had like damage over time effects onto them, and you just need to like top them off. So in order to have this soul go away, you just need to be able to put it to full health, or bring it, remove one of the disease dispels or the curse dispel or whatever it is, right? So you have to either remove the affliction, any of them, by the way, not all of them, or top it off. So we don't know exactly how much health these guys are going to have, but it lends to reason. 1 global is all it takes to be able to remove one of these effects. And keep in mind, there is no magic effect, so you can't just slam dunk a mass dispel and call it a day. You need to actually have one of these dispels and be talented into it. And if you fail to do so, then it reduces the haste of all players by 100%. So an extremely, extremely high bar requirement. This is the one that is actually impacting healers the most. And my frustration with this is that this is pretty much explosive all over again. Explosive as an affix, especially at high levels, but I think it also trickles down to the general population as we experience this week of M+. It's this affix that it's always going to be more optimal for the healer to take care of it and the healer to deal with it. Some DPS specs actually have to give up damage in order to spec into their dispel, and some of them it's just mildly inconvenient. And whenever anything is even mildly inconvenient, the buck gets passed to the healer to take care of it. And so, while I don't imagine these guys are going to be spawning faster than every 8 seconds, they do have a long 10-second cast, which means if 2 did spawn at the same time, there would be the possibility that you would have to like heal one, dispel another, or maybe just dispel both of them really quickly if you're that lightning quick. But at the same time, we'd still have to see how much healing is required onto it. The other side is that if you ever get into a situation where you have to heal them, then that means for those users who play with like Voodoo, or even people who play with like Blizzard's default click cast frames, you're going to need to make adjustments to your gameplay to be able to properly heal these enemies, which is really frustrating. If they spawn infrequently, it could be something as simple as just having a mouse over dispel. Not that big of a deal. But if you ever get into a situation where you needed to heal like 2 or 3 of these and dispel 1, or beg a DPS to be able to make sure that they're spec'd into their dispel of a disease, curse, or poison, because again, it could be any of the 3, that's just going to be incredibly frustrating. They are getting rid of explosive, or sorry, they're changing around explosive, I should say, so that it's not only going to be the healer's responsibility, but then they add an affix, which just forces the healer to be the one taking care of it. It's just immensely frustrating. I just don't actually get it at all. So this is the affix that I'm most frustrated with. I hate the most going into it. We'll see what kind of changes that they're making, but so far, I just can't stand it. Entangling. Now, this one just says, while in combat, vines snare players. What this actually is these like plant mini games that you would have on like your farm in Mist Pandaria. It was featured a couple of different times, where you just keep on pulling against a tether, and then you snap it, and then you're no longer slowed. So it's a 50% slow. You need to run away from the anchor point within 8 seconds, or you get stunned for 3 seconds. Very, very important to note. I just want to emphasize, we just have another affix coming around the table after all the fun we had from Thundering to get more stuns. That being said, 50% slow for a lot of specs is not that bad. Even Priest, you could potentially just phantasm it off. But if I remember correctly, playing with some of those like snare effects and mini games, there were times where Phantasm didn't actually remove the slows, so I hope it does. All in all, the biggest threat that I really have for an affix like Entangling is being able to predict when it's going to happen. Quaking is one of the affixes that are removing, but one of the big things with Quaking is you can always predict when it's going to happen, and even just having one person in voice comms be able to say, hey, there's Quaking soon, be aware of it, be mindful of it, allows you to change and adjust your gameplay. If Entangling is one of these affixes where you can predict when it's going to happen, the way Quaking happens every, 40 seconds, 30, 40 seconds, and you can have a weak core and you can just track it and it's simple, great. Otherwise, for some of these teams and some of the players, it could just be really, really annoying if it happens at a random time that you're not able to predict or prepare for. Because, yeah, we could have an Entangling and Sanguine combo or something, but a tank could also just leap out and be very far out of range. As it happens, they break their vine, and they can take care of it because they're aware of it. There actually is counterplay. How much counterplay a lot of these affixes are going to have is going to be incredibly important. Incorporeal, the third one, is actually not that bad at all from the sounds of it. It's an extra ad that you need to control when it pops up. So it has a 20-second buff duration, can't really be killed, and you got to deal with it for 20 seconds. So this spell that deals a damage down to players, if the cast gets off, it does 50% damage and healing down to what looks like a player specifically. It doesn't say that it actually deals it to everybody in the party. So that could be another area where maybe somebody could just immune this as well if an ad is at a really inconvenient location. The other side of it is that these casts are 8 seconds long. They're really, really long casts. So potentially somebody with a short kick could just completely isolate it. But they are also susceptible to all forms of crowd control. Now, I'm not exactly sure how that phrase is going to work in practice. Being susceptible to all forms of crowd control, a generous translation of that could mean that it's sort of like an Omni minion, that it could be affected by things like Shackle Undead, even if it wasn't an undead type target. I don't know if an amalgamation type mob exists in World of Warcraft yet, but that would be a really interesting idea if that was possible, that any form of crowd control. I know Paladins have like a Fear Undead type spell cast that they could utilize as well. If something like that were possible, where these or what is the Hunter, like Hibernate or something along those lines that they have, if all of these different forms of crowd control that every spec in the game had that were mob specific or mob type specific, that would be a really interesting way to do this affix, because all in all, it seems like it's a way of just kind of teaching players at the level 7 affix, hey, here's how to like crowd control mobs, make sure you deal with it, because if it gets off, you get a massive healing and damage down, and it's a really big penalty, it's a really impactful thing. But if you're in a big trash pack and the incorporeal spawns in or around the trash pack, you're just going to hit it with like AoE stuns, like blinding lights and just whatever you have going on at the time anyway, because just mass stunning enemies is always going to be good to be able to reduce tank pressure, reduce casts, you name it. I don't think this is going to be something that you just need tons of extra kicks to be able to contend with, and that seems to be a pretty good thing. It seems to be the potential to be extraordinarily frustrating, but if they do actually go with something where all forms of crowd control are a viable option, this kind of seems like it's going to be the Shrouded Affix all over again with the Nathrazim, except maybe even easier, where you do have the little bat that spawns every, I think, literally like 20 seconds. It spawns, you interrupt it one time, you dealt with it, it's done, it's over with, good. And that's about it. So I'm not really that threatened by Incorporeal. I will say, however, I am extremely concerned by the timings that Entangling could throw at us, and the predictability of it, as well as throwing another affix in the form of Afflicted right back at us once again. And also, it's important to note that Quaking, Grievous, and Volcanic have been removed. Volcanic, I absolutely get, because this was like a joke of an affix. Grievous, I don't quite understand, because as far as healer affixes go, this is just like fine. They actually like nerfed it into oblivion, I would argue, to the point that Grievous really wasn't killing you. I wasn't even afraid to play Grievous on my Disc Priest, and that was like our arch nemesis for like 4 or 5 years straight. Actually longer than that, probably like 6 years, man. But yeah, it was at a point where it just didn't matter anymore, so I guess they want to keep on challenging them healers, woo! And of course, Quaking, I actually am a little frustrated by. While it had some really nasty combos, and that they had to like manually fix, kind of like when you get dragged in by a boss, like the end of Algathar Academy with Doragosa, That's probably the reason, is that it limited some of their encounter design, and you never want to have an affix that limits encounter design. Overall, I like those affixes that it's like, well, this is happening soon, and short of the boss stacking all of us up in the exact same spot, there's counterplay, right? So that was a little bit more frustrating. But as I said, they are looking for combination feedback for level 4 and level 7. The biggest one that everybody talked about, though, was Sanguine and, of course, Entangling coming out at the same time. I would be a little bit worried as well about having to deal with, like, Spiteful Entangling. Entangling in general just seems the one that could be the most impactful for the average person, whereas Afflicted is going to be one that actually consumes a lot of healer attention. Being in a situation where you'd have Bursting and Afflicted at the same time, where you have to choose between dispelling the afflicted target and then potentially being able to use your dispel on yourself, because a lot of non-priest players, they're not going to have mass dispel, obviously. They may not have a shadow priest in their group, and being able to dispel your own bursting is really valuable, whether it's on yourself or some other vulnerable target who may not be in the field of like your AoE output or something. And then you're gumming up all those dispels by dealing with the afflicted. Also, we don't really know if those afflicted souls are going to be capturing a lot of AoE spells. So AoE capped healing spells like Spirit Bloom, for example. What happens if your Spirit Bloom just hits one of these souls instead of hitting one of your allies? And when they spawn randomly and you're planning to AoE heal everybody, and then yoink, an afflicted soul eats up a heal meant for Jimmy the Hunter, then Jimmy the Hunter dies, it could be extraordinarily frustrating to be able to contend with. Lastly, Explosive has come full circle, and it's back to its probably original form, where it has substantially higher health, but now it also spawns less frequently. How much health it's going to have is going to be interesting to look at. Somebody in my chat asked me if there would be a world where it had so much health and it spawned so infrequently that teams would often just let it explode rather than take the damage globals to kill it and then ask their healer to out-heal it. That sounds like a nightmare, but knowing damage dealers, who's to say? After we are able to properly test this on PTR, I'll have another video which goes over it, shows all of these affixes in action so we can properly show and highlight how they're doing. But the important thing to keep in mind is that all three of these affixes are separate from each other. So while they're new, scary, and probably going to take some more time to learn, they're not going to be stacked on top of each other. The biggest thing that Blizzard's got to worry about is making sure these level 4 affixes are not happening at the exact same time, or not having anti-synergies or like really rough synergies. I think Sanguine and Entangling is very obvious, but it's also going to be important to look at where Entangling is just not going to be able to properly function, because then you have Bolstering and Raging, which could also be extremely painful for your tank, getting slowed at terrible times when they're trying to kite and trying to survive. So we'll see. Let me know what you guys think about the affixes so far. The last thing that I also wanted to be able to highlight is there's tier set updates, and the disc one, it's a little bit rough. Shadow Pain, Purge the Wicked damage is increased. Shield absorbs additional damage. This 2 set is worse than the old one from a tuning perspective, but I'd like it because I don't like taking contrition. They could just bump up the numbers with this anytime, and that happens all the time with set bonuses, so that's not a big deal. But this 4 set, the previous 4 set was every like 3 cast of Penance, you'd proc Shadow Covenant. Now this new 4 set is every 3 cast a Powered Shield cause your next atonement granted by Powered Shield to last an additional 15 seconds and heal 20% more. This, super frustrating, super annoying. I don't want to have to like prep and hold on to my shields in advance of incoming damage before I start my ramp to guarantee that 3 out of my 20 atonements are going to last longer and heal more. Huzzah. It's just annoying. It's like so much extra uptime of atonement that I would basically be like overlapping and refreshing to get more shield value, because I want to cast my shield on cooldown. I want to be incentivized to cast my shield on cooldown. Hate the design of this 4 set bonus. Hate what it's doing. It's like too much atonement uptime on too few of targets, and that's just not fun. I want to be able to have just wider ramp windows where I have more atonement uptime. And by God, I really hope they do something about the button bloat for damage abilities for 10.1, because it's coming very fast, and we're going to be getting all kinds of coverage, getting everybody prepped and ready to go. All right, thank you so much for watching, guys. Be sure to subscribe once again if you have not already. And be sure to tune into our live stream this weekend as we'll be doing our MDI watch party, as well as a ton of Mythic Plus testing for 10.1. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll catch you all next time.